So hello everyone. Today I'm in conversation with Nicole Kellet and Abdoulaye Ndiaye, and they're both joining from Maine, Farmington in the US. And they're going to talk about their virtual exchange, which focuses on environmental justice. But before we dig in, please, Nicole and Abdoulaye, please introduce yourselves.
All right, I'm Abdoulaye Ndiaye. I am specialized in American studies, American literature, and civilization. I teach at the university, Cheikh Anta Diop University in Dakar, Senegal.
I'm a professor of anthropology here at the University of Maine, Farmington, and I teach anthropology courses primarily on gender, medical anthropology, health, Latin America. I work primarily in Peru, but I also do work in Uganda and with returning citizens, particularly women who have been incarcerated here in the United States. And I've been here at the University of Maine, Farmington for 13 years.
Okay, thank you for joining me today. We're going to talk about your virtual exchange. This is an interesting collaboration, Senegal, US. So please tell me how this came about. How did you meet and how did you get collaborating?
Well, so I did not know Abdoulaye, and I've never been to Senegal. But this was an opportunity from my colleague, our colleague, Dr. Linda Beck, who has been to Senegal, is very well versed in Senegal, as well as her husband. They've lived, worked, researched there. And so she had connections in Senegal.
Yes.
And that these connections were also interested in environmental justice. And I was teaching a class on environmental justice. And so we decided to do a virtual exchange. And so that's how it came about, is through this connection through our mutual colleague.
It was done virtually, as the name indicates it. So we were working through there's the West African Research Center in Senegal, which welcomes intellectuals from everywhere, especially in Africa, and they provided the venue for us. So we selected 12 students for us, 12 or 13. 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they selected also some students, and we would meet every other Wednesday, or we had a schedule. So we had some themes like deforestation, coastal erosion, etc., and they were divided into different groups, and they had to work together, and then try to come up with some materials and presentations, and it went very well because on our part we would meet with them, me and Dr. Louis Mendy, who's my former supervisor.
Yeah, Nicole, please expand on we were talking about environmental justice, land use. Give us a little bit more detail in the content and add to what Abdoulaye was telling us.
Yeah, so, the students were able to pick from different options of areas that they wanted to focus on. And so the students would look at how this was playing out, coastal erosion or deforestation or overfishing. We had these different topics in Senegal versus the United States to be able to see what are the different histories, the different economies, the different cultures that related to how these are playing out differently in these different areas. And so our students were coming from various different backgrounds, English literature. I had a lot of students in anthropology, environmental science. And so they all, I think, approached it a little bit differently, thinking about more of the cultural, more of the economy, more of the actual natural science behind overfishing, or looking at some of those rules and regulations around fishing. Some of those informal and formal regulations and how that's different in these different contexts. So yeah, it was, I think, very nuanced in how they approach the topics.
And for some of our students, because in Senegal we have different backgrounds. So some live in areas which are dealing with deforestation, others with coastal erosion, like those who live by the sea. You see, they have the phenomenon of coastal erosion. So they took it very personally for some of them. You see, so it related to them, to what they go through on a daily basis. So they chose those topics depending on that and on their studies.
And it was also really interesting, I think, for our students, because your students talked about deforestation in relation to spirituality and religion, and how losing some of the forest and how that is an area of sacred prayer and different spirits. And so it's not just about land use and resources, but that spiritual basis
It's
for the
true.
culture, which my students were, oh, this is so
It's true.
fascinating.
Especially in the south of Senegal, you have that religion. They are about 1% of the population, but it's like, a spirituality that stems from the environment, the forest, etc. And it's very appealing to them. So yeah, it's true. That's another dimension which is very important also.
Tell me more about the spirituality aspect of it. I love that. I think that's
Yeah,
really
in Senegal we are 95% are Muslims, about 4% Christians, but 1%, is that spirituality that they live, and it's in the deep forest in Casamance. What is called Casamance, you have three regions. You have Ziguinchor, Kolda, and Sédhiou. But in Ziguinchor, you have in Oussouye particularly, you have somebody who's like a spiritual chief, and he's the leader over there. Okay, and they have that religion, which is connected to the environment, to the forest, etc., to the ancestors, and that's what they believe in. And she's right. Deforestation for them is more than just what you go through, but it is more about what they believe in. So it's very
So it's
important for
not
them.
just a physical happening, it's a
Exactly,
spiritual
exactly, yeah.
happening as well. Can I just ask, I want to backtrack. I forgot to ask you, over how many weeks did your students collaborate with each other on this project?
March to May,
I think so.
yeah,
Yeah.
About 8 weeks?
About 8
about 8
weeks.
weeks, yes.
And
Yeah.
was that a good amount of time for them? Because presumably the students are coming from very different backgrounds, culturally, religious, everything that you can think of. So do you think they had enough time to get to know each other before embarking on this collaboration?
I mean, as a cultural anthropologist,
Mm.
we go into the field for a year and feel like we're just beginning to understand what's happening. So for 8 weeks,
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like that's not enough time.
You had to pack it all in.
Yeah, I feel like the pieces that are my students, I think the topics of the environmental justice were very interesting, and especially when different pieces came out, like about spirituality and informal economies and things like that. But the takeaway from my students was really these little tidbits that they learned about life in Senegal. Learning about how at the university in Dakar, they pay $35
Yes.
a year
It's
for
true.
their education. My students were, so I think it was those pieces. And so I would like to be able to have more time just having that cultural exchange, getting to know each other. We talked about last night how wonderful it'd be to really figure out how to keep the students connected after the VGE or after the virtual experience or exchange, because I think maybe some of them have, but really how to tie that more
Yes,
in.
yes, it's true. It's true. Yeah. It was quite short for them to know each other, especially since that they were learning so many things, new things, and amazing thing for them. It's true. In Senegal, our university is a public university, so they just register at the beginning of the year, and then that's it. So it's not expensive compared to the US, and so they don't have much time to try to absorb all the information that they were getting from their counterparts.
Did the students work synchronously and asynchronously? How did that structure? Were they divided into groups? Tell me a bit more about the actual nuts and bolts of it.
So we had them into groups of about 4 Senegalese students and about 4 UMaine Farmington students and 2 Senegalese students in each group, just how the numbers worked out. And we had some times when we met together synchronously during our class period, and then they were able to meet or were tasked to meet outside of class to continue working on their project. And I think one challenge with that was the time difference, 4 to 5 hours,
Yes.
to be able to meet and plan those times. I think if there's availability to meet more during established class time or my time, that just reinforces or assures that they're going to have that time together, but that can be really challenging.
Yes, it definitely is. I think we did a good job trying to manage the time differences, because we would meet at around 3 p.m., 4 p.m. in Senegal. So here it was 10, 11. Yeah. But it
Sounds
was not
reasonable.
obvious. Sorry?
That sounds reasonable. That
Yes.
sounds like they
Yeah.
can
Yes,
manage,
yes.
they can manage. So did you have a lot of input, or was it required that the students organise themselves more? And if so, did they manage that then?
Yes.
Or was that one of the things that did you have to push
No,
them
go ahead
to?
first. Go ahead. Mhm.
I think, and we've talked about this, I think one issue was my students were really concerned about the final project and about their grade in the final project. So I think that they got really concerned about being able to meet and asking for resources from one another, like, can you send us your draft? And then
Yes.
and so then there was I think a little bit of maybe misunderstanding on expectations on either side,
Mm.
where my students were expecting bullet points, and then your students are giving them 5-6 pages, single space
Oh,
essays.
Yes, yes.
okay.
So I think we learned how to really clarify
Yes.
those expectations for either side. Yeah, I think that maybe they also, because they were so concerned about their grade, my students became a little tense. And so that closed them off to being a little more open to just having that cultural experience. And I think there's cultural differences, obviously,
Mm, yes.
where
Well, that's the point of doing a virtual exchange, isn't it? To make each other curious about the other and learn from each other and sort of understand and become curious about the other culture. What would you say about the expectations of your students, Abdoulaye? Were they more relaxed than
Yes, yeah, I think it was more fun for our students because they were only expecting, extra points. And they were so eager and enthusiastic to meet those American, students and to try to get to know them more, know about their culture, their society. And for some of them, they are trying to get special in American studies, you see? And that was the problem actually. And the cultural differences, they're asking too many questions, or maybe, a little bit inquisitive sometimes, you see. So yeah, but expectations were really, really, I mean, they had high expectations, but not on the from the viewpoint of grades, etc. But it was more fun for them, just wanting to meet them, to know them, and to know about
yeah,
the society. Yeah,
right.
and to get the extra points.
Nicole, you're itching to get in there. What do you want to add?
Yeah, I think, it was like some of my students would be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe these students asked me this and asked me that. And, we talked about how in the United States, it's such a big country and there are regional differences. I'm originally from the Midwest, which I think is more in line with Senegalese
Yes.
curiosity.
Yes.
You ask people about all of these personal
Yes.
questions.
Yes.
So I didn't think anything of it, but I think the students in my class were a little thrown
That's
about asking these
interesting.
personal questions about relationships, gender identity, all of these things.
Wow.
So it was really good for my students to realize that people approach one another in very different ways.
Exactly. We try to let them know that they don't have to ask too many questions, etc. But in Senegal, people are very, open, and
Right.
they love, chatting and discussing with people. For them, is showing respect and consideration for the person. So it's different from here. So we try to ask them not to ask too many private questions, but it's difficult to control the private conversation that they have between them. But that was one of the issues that we had, and I understood that it was a little bit sensitive on, yeah.
Excellent. It sounds like it was a massive learning curve on all sides, but for teachers and students as well. What are some of the highlights that you'd like to share? I mean, obviously, this cultural exchange and this curiosity is coming across very strongly. What else would you say for the students? What are their main takeaways?
Yeah, go ahead. Ladies first.
I think that they really just enjoyed having the opportunity to engage with people that they normally would not have the opportunity to engage with. That a lot of the students here at University of Maine Farming may not have the resources to study abroad or to go on a travel course. And so just having that opportunity to talk with other students, to learn about these differences.
Mm.
And I think for, thinking about kind of the takeaways and the positives, also kind of learning from that too, because I think we had this VGE sort of added on, not last minute, but well, I already had the course sort of planned out. And so I would carve out more space in the course to be able to have the students in class just really reflect on all of these experiences, because I think that there was a lot of rich feedback and, engagement that maybe I'm not even privy to because I didn't have that space to really hear more from the students about their experiences.
Yes.
Abdoulaye, come in.
Yeah, I think so. For the takeaways, I think, we talked about it, try to insist more on the cultural aspect of it. I think it would be more fun for the American students. But for Senegalese students, for most of them, they come from rural areas at Cheikh Anta Diop University. So they were really excited only to come to Dakar's capital city and to study Cheikh Anta Diop University is a big deal for them. And now to get to know the American students, etc. So it was it was impressive for them. So it was a great experience for them, and they really appreciate it. And all the feedback I got from them were wonderful feedback. Maybe if we have more time for next time, and try to make to insist on those cultural aspects, it would be great.
I think one thing that I might do differently is, that I'm new to Senegal and I learned a great deal about Senegal from this experience. But I had done a virtual exchange with a colleague in Peru. And so I know about Peru, and it was a class about Latin America. So I had a lot of material about that country and the culture and the history. So I would incorporate more background on Senegal.
Yes.
I had some, but I feel like I would want more to be able to really have that greater cultural understanding.
Yeah, it was easier for me since I'm special in American studies. So
Yeah, so it's there already. It's baked in.
Yeah, so my students were better prepared. Maybe it was one of the reasons why they were more relaxed. I think they were better prepared, and I had at least 2 meetings with them. I think 2 meetings with Dr. Mendy, and we kind of explained everything to them. Yes, I think it's important to do that. Try to incorporate those elements beforehand to the students.